Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at GLAR for our fourth podcast. My name is Stephen Etzel, and I'm here with Kellie Stokes, a real estate attorney and a title company owner. And we have her today to ask her several questions about the different types of title policies and what title policies are and the risks that are involved in title policies. Thank you, Kellie, for showing up today.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're just going to start off today with probably the most common question that I believe, not only being in the real estate business I get, but also as an educator I get, is what is title insurance? And why do we have to have this title insurance?
Great question. Of course, I get that question often as well, being that I own a title company. And, you know, the biggest reason and kind of the lead-in I always give people is you have title insurance to protect you from somebody else coming in and taking your home from you. You know, your home is your biggest asset typically. It's, you know, it is the backbone of the American economy. And so we want to protect home ownership. We want people to know that they buy that home, it's theirs. Somebody else can't come in and take ownership because they have a prior right to the home. So that's why you get title insurance. We come in and we do our due diligence to make sure that we protect your ownership.
How long has this title insurance been around?
In fact, it's been around over 130 years.
130 years. That is a long time to have an insurance policy.
Well, it's, 130 years is how long title insurance is being used to help the homeowner in America. In fact, one of our prior big presidents, Abraham Lincoln, his family lost their real estate, their home, 2 different times in his lifetime.
Wow.
And so, you know, we have big history of people losing their homes, which is why the title industry came into play.
That's huge. So, kind of an overall what title insurance is, what are the biggest risks that you can actually lose your property from?
Well, maybe it'd be helpful if I gave you kind of an explanation of what a title company really does. What we do is we go in and we research the history of what's happened around a piece of property. So, for example, there's been probably in the past somebody has received a loan from a bank, so they've financed the purchase. So then there was a lien put on the property for that loan that was used to purchase the property. And so anytime then a property was purchased and sold, a deed was used. And so there's all these different documents that are filed in the real property records. And so what we do is we go in and we search the real property records, and we make sure that all those transfers happened properly, and make sure that if there was a lien, was it then released when it was paid off? But what if it wasn't paid off? If not, then we still have to deal with that lien. And so we're looking at all these different things that are in the real property records and determining what needs to be dealt with in order to make sure that the person purchasing the property is going to have clean title. So this is really different than other insurance.
I was going to say that it sounds nothing like car insurance.
No. So you go get car insurance, they have no idea if you're going to get in a wreck next week, in a year. They just maybe look at your driving record and decide you might be a little bit risky. But and I'm not saying you would be risky.
Not me at all.
I'm just saying in general that you might be risky. So they're just insuring on what might happen in the future. Whereas what title companies do is we go in and we work backwards. We're going to go look at what happened up to the point in which we now are going to sell it. We're going to look back to the history of everything that has happened around that property, who has bought and sold it, who has gone and gotten a lien up against the property. Maybe somebody that didn't mow the lawn and the city came in and decided to put a mowing lien on the property. And so there's all these different things we're going to look at and decide what needs to get resolved, so that when the person transfers title at the closing that we're in charge of, that we make sure they have full title. Now the problem is,
I was just about ready to lead into that. The biggest issue would be,
well, here's the thing. We're looking at all these documents that are recorded in the real property records. We have no idea if there was a forgery involved. Right. We don't, let's say in the back in the history, someone had died, and then they think they had the right people transferring title to the next owners. We don't know. We can look at the history of it, look at all the legal documents we can get our hands on, but we don't know. That's the risk. And so the risk becomes now on the new homeowner. What if there's somebody way back when that didn't sign a deed that should have signed a deed?
Somebody may be able to claim that, right?
They surely, and they would be able to. That's the way the law works. And so they would be able to come in and claim ownership. Well, here somebody just took their life investment to buy their family home to raise their kids, and now someone's going to come in and try to claim ownership to their property. And that's what title insurance does. They're going to secure that you have full title. And if, in fact, somebody shows up and tries to make that sort of claim, the title insurance company is going to come in and fight that and going to litigate that entire thing for you, and you don't have to pay anything to resolve, and that's going to be for the title company to go resolve.
That's a great, not only insurance, but assurance, the fact that once I get a deed to a property, that I don't have to worry about a third party coming back and saying, hey, I have a claim on that property, such as a mechanic's lien.
That's right. Oh, definitely. If somebody made an improvement, built a new garage, and they didn't decide to pay one of the contractors on the project, now that person has a right to put a lien against the property, and if that lien hasn't been resolved, that person could come in and put a lien on the property and try to get the new owner to pay them for the garage. And that new owner, they have no reason to pay this person. They never hired them, but they might be forced into that situation if they didn't have title insurance.
That's a scary situation.
It's definitely. That's what our job is. Our job is to go in and clean it up as best as possible, but then also understand that we are going to protect you from any future risks of things that might come up.
And here's another future risk that could possibly come up as well. What happens if somebody died without a will?
Well, it's probably one of the most common problems that we have that come up. And so, oftentimes we'll have maybe one of the children that come to us and want to sell the property. Better yet, they're going to go to a real estate agent, and the real estate agent's going to work with them, and they're going to say, my mom, my dad, or both of them have passed away. We have the family home. We need to sell it. And they're going to work under the assumption that, well, mom and dad had the house, and of course we can sell it.
I get that all the time. Like when a family member dies, they actually inherit the property free and clear.
And that's not. And I wish that's the way it worked.
Not only is it not free and clear, but there could also be liens on it too.
That's right. And so one of the big issues that comes into play, and we don't always enjoy having to make this phone call, but we have to often, is where you might have two spouses and one passed away, and so the survivor now has the property and wants to sell it, and they go then they just assume, well, this was our family home, we had this home together, it's my home. Well, then we discover, did you go to the court and have a will of some sort that left you the home? We're asking the new spouse, the surviving spouse, this question, and they say to us, well, there was no will. And so we go, okay, well, we can help resolve this. Let's just ask you a few more questions. And one of the big things that people don't understand in Texas is that everybody understands, for some reason, seems to understand community property.
Yes.
But they don't seem to understand what that then means. And so what happens is that surviving spouse thinks it was community property. I own it. Well, I ask a few more questions and I find out that the deceased spouse had a child that was not of that marriage. It was a prior child, that maybe they had when they were young, maybe they had it in another marriage, but then they married the new spouse, who I'm the one who I'm dealing with, and that new spouse, says, well, we have children together, and so everything goes to me. Well, no, because of this other child, and because there's no will, guess what? That's deceased spouse share of the community property. That their 50% goes to all the kids, including the child that wasn't of the marriage.
So it basically defaults back to what the state says at that point.
That's right. You're stuck with, if you don't write your own will, then you're going to be stuck with the will that the state writes for you in the estates code.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Another issue that I've ran into actually recently was What happens if they say they're divorced and they're not?
Well, in Texas, we don't have separation. We have you're either married or you're divorced. And so we get that often where people come in and say, well, I don't care. I'm just going to let my husband go, sell the house and it's all theirs and I'll sign a deed. And it doesn't work that way. And so if all the way up until the day you're divorced, both parties, if they're on title and they're married, even if they're not on title, if they're married, your spouse needs to sign the deed at closing. And so it's only after divorce that we can deal with possibly one of the parties now just owning the property. But prior to the divorce, both will need to sign at closing.
That's a huge misconception, too.
It really is, because it can and can cause some problems, right? Because obviously there's some conflict between the parties, and they don't want to work well together to sell the home. And we have amazing real estate agents out there that are able to get them to the closing table, but then they find out they have to both sign, and we always try to work respectfully to that. We can always let one spouse come in at 9 a.m. and the other one come in at 5 so they don't run into each other. So we will work hard to make that work for them, but they will both have to sign.
So knowing all this information, definitely very, very, very good information to know, especially if you're going to go out and buy a house, or you feel like you're married, or you feel you don't have a will. Common law married. How about that one?
The good old common law marriage. Texas, we like to be different. We've got community property, and we also have common law. So what is common law? Well, common law is where two people put themselves out there as a married couple. And so the statute's very clear on what it takes to be common law married. And so two people show up into our office and say, we're common law married and we own this piece of property, then they're telling us they're married. We're going to treat them as married, okay? But that's not usually how the issue comes up. How the issue comes up is one of them dies, and now the survivor's trying to say, no, we were common law married. Well, unfortunately, you need both of you to declare while you're together that you're married for that to work, where you don't need to involve a court. You could sign an affidavit or what have you for two people to come together and say we're common law married. But when one person's trying to declare that they were common law married, you're going to have to go through the court system and have a judge get convinced that, yes, you were common law married and that you met the requirements. The main thing being that you held yourself out as a married couple.
That's a real sticky situation.
It really is. We had this come up just this week in our office, whereby a woman was trying to claim that she was common law married, and we understood what she was trying to claim, but unfortunately the husband had passed away, and we said, you're going to have to go through the court system to declare that. We don't get the joy of playing judge and jury. We have to push you through the court system and let them decide.
So how do I get this title insurance?
Well, title insurance is going to come through the contract, okay? So when you're working, and I would encourage everybody to work with a real estate agent in their transaction, and real estate agents are required to go through title companies, as you can see why, because we want to secure people's investments here in Texas. That's what the public policy is. And so when people try to work outside of title companies, it can be a risky proposition. So the contract itself, when you're working with a real estate agent, is going to push you to use a title company. And oftentimes real estate agents are going to give advice to the consumer as to who they think is a good title company to use. And then it's through that contract, then the title company is going to get engaged, and then we're in charge of following the directions given to us in the title company. We're a neutral party. So understand that. I don't think a lot of people understand. A title company is a neutral party. We're not there to interpret the contract. We're there to follow the contract. So we follow whatever it says, black and white. We can't, if both people come to us with different arguments, we don't get to be the judge and jury and decide. We have to be neutral at all times. And so
that's very important to know, because the contract itself is basically the blueprint.
That's right. And we follow the blueprint. And if there's anything confusing, we have to go back to both parties, ask for the clarity, and both parties have to agree on the clarity given to us.
How much does this title company, or how much does this title policy cost?
Typically, a standard number I kind of throw out to people is it's going to be just below about 1% of the sales price. So, if it's $100,000, it's going to be just below $1,000. That's a good number to work with. But it's a one-time fee. So unlike your car insurance, where you have to pay that monthly or quarterly or annually, it's very different. You pay for title insurance one time, and then it insures you for the length of owning that home.
Excellent. I want to thank you, Kelly, for joining us today. This has been very, very, very enlightening and very, very eye-opening in a lot of ways as well. I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And if you have anything last to say before we wrap it up?
Well, I'm just grateful to be here and appreciate you asking me to be a part of this.
Thank you again, Kelly. This has been another broadcast episode of Real Estate Pros in the Nose from the Greater Lewisville Association. We'll see you next month. Thank you.